Welcome to the channel, guys. My name is Chase Maddox. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Michael O'Neill, who has been the guitarist for George Benson for over 40 years, as well as amazing other artists like Stevie Wonder. In this video today, we're going to discuss Benson's formula, what Quincy Jones called Benson's formula, when he wanted him to get that extra sauce.
Dang, it's right there. Half step down. Let's take it up before us. It's there.
We're going to discuss never before heard stories about Benson, about his approach, as well as very, very specific techniques relating to Benson's octave approach. Many of these things with this octave approach, I haven't seen anyone else talk about. Michael shows us what he's seen from being the guitarist behind Benson for decades. So really, really special. Let Michael know in the comments below that you enjoyed this. Thank him for his time. And I'll let you guys get into the video. Benson's thing with octaves is he plays these with the fifths. And so this is sort of an example of that. Just from your experience, I know there's a lot of different ways Benson uses octaves that we're gonna get into. Do you think it's accurate to say that sort of the main, I guess, innovation that Benson has on octaves, say from like a Wes Montgomery approach, is he adds in that fifth or fourth, or how would you think about that?
Yeah, I think that certainly is one of the components that do define his style. Yeah, adding the interval in between is huge, of course. And then of course, I mean, you would have to add his the dimension of him as a vocalist in terms of the phrases he plays. Because it's like someone turned on a faucet and it just came out like crazy. The water just came out like insane, and it's like him just singing. Yeah, I think that is a big element in it too.
There are a lot of examples in here where he plays, like you're saying, I'm glad you brought that up, is he plays the octaves in such a fluid way instead of necessarily articulating every single note, that it sounds like sort of a vocal run or bend.
Exactly. I think you're right. And I've always felt that like what set him apart as a jazz guitarist, apart from most other jazz guitar players, is that quality of dynamic and phrasing variety. There's so much more variety, like many of the jazz guitar world, as we know, you got to have chops, and so there's a lot of sixteenths and whatever. But George's rhythmic variety, right, is like sets him apart.
Yeah, absolutely, especially on these octaves.
I would add one other component that's important here in terms of George's mentality with this is drama. Storytelling drama. It's a big part of his process too. Like creating like how like he'll be doing these stuff and he'll build and build, and then he'll build to a point where in some of the example too later I know you have where it goes away from even the notes. It gets into like this.
Yeah, he's like almost just like I mean, it's like he's some of the elements that I know it's ones you're talking about. It's almost like he's like DJ scratching on the guitar or being just purely rhythm on that. And it's like you're saying, it's for the effect of that storytelling and just like bringing it to like a climax that you wouldn't even expect. So yeah, we'll definitely get into those. Let me bring up this clip where I think in this section, this is on Affirmation. And these are all coming from this 2008 North Sea Jazz Fest concert that you're on with him. And so this is clips from Affirmation, and I think it really does show his like vocal quality that you're talking about with some of these slides. So let me bring that up. Is that sort of the idea that you were talking about, where he's doing all these kind of like almost like vocal slides, sliding in and then also sliding out? Yeah. What do you notice in that clip?
Oh, well, a lot of what you just said, of course, and which translates into beauty, right? It's just, it becomes beautiful, as opposed to like, like a typical like 16th note machine gun jazz guitar approach. It's like, it has peaks and valleys, and it's art. It becomes art to me. And then also there's the aspect of when he came up with the cutting sessions of jazz. It's like, the old school where like, oh, you want to sit in? Yeah, come on. We'll count Cherokee way up here.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like, no one's going to outplay me, man. There's a lot. George was like, there's a lot of that in his personality. Fight his way to success to make a good life for himself and his family. It was like a drive that he had for that, and a fearlessness. That's another thing that he's like that I've learned from him is like, it's like you can't be scared up there. You got to experiment, try things, fall down, and discover things along the way. So he's big on that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely get that from his playing, where there is that he'll just like go for something and attack it, and he doesn't. If there's a flub note here and there, it's really insignificant to the just power of the like idea and the vision of what he's doing. Now, obviously, he's a virtuoso, but even when there's like those things that just technically may not have come out, like I said, it's just superseded by the like the fearlessness, like you said. And so you hear that a lot in those clips, especially on like that where he's like all the way up high here and then kind of sliding back. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention to your point about the vocal nature is, at least in that clip, you really get a sense of like this call and response where he's playing the octaves up high here and then he responds down low and then he plays up high here, which is another important aspect connecting to his vocal style.
I totally agree. I agree with all of that. Yeah. And it's funny too. I mean, as an insider, which is, I'd like to share this. This is will help. He surprises himself as he's going through a fearless approach to something, and he'll hit something, and we have some pictures of him where he does that, where his eyes bug out, and it's just like, it's great. Yeah.
Relating to the octaves and how that factors into such a big part of Benson's playing, whether it's on a lot of his like iconic melodies, right? Whether it's Affirmation or Give Me the Night or a bunch of other ones. How, if how did that come about in his playing the octaves, or why is it so frequently used by him in this kind of music? I know you were mentioning Quincy Jones had a sort of name for it.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, if we trace the origins, first of all, we would have to start with Wes Montgomery, with the for George's influence as far as starting with just basic octaves, right? So with just the pure octaves, and he went on and played with a lot of organ trio stuff. Jimmy Smith, and he had his own organ trio with Dr. Lonnie Smith, and so he loved the sound, and he's very George has this like scientist part of his personality, where he gets very intrigued with something, especially in sound, and wants to duplicate it. So when he got into like the octaves of and then shaking them, this came from, I think, from his influence of playing with organists, where organists do that with the right hand, shake the thing like this.
So when you're doing that with the right hand, maybe we can back up a little bit and show sort of how technically that would be done. Are you using your various fingers for that on the right hand, or?
Yeah, I'm using thumb, index, and middle finger.
Okay.
Is the formula. So, and then it's like, it takes a minute to sort of like get like a consistent steadiness with, like this.
Yeah.
and then applying it, speeding it up some. So it's this. That's how one would practice it.
So it's like thumb, fingers, not thumb, index, middle?
Right, thumb, fingers.
Yeah, that feels way more natural than trying to do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And it also has, like you were doing, the slide element to that, of getting into it, right? Yeah. That's just like a singer kind of having like a little sustain or vibrato, when as guitarists our notes kind of die off pretty quickly. It's not like a horn player. So, and yeah, like you said, the organist kind of having those notes.
Yeah. So then, as you mentioned, the Quincy Jones thing, it's interesting. So as George developed this like kind of a personal, unique expansion of the octave concept, which he, kind of came through Wes. Quincy Jones, in producing him on the "Give Me the Night" record, recognized that sound and fell in love with it. And he not just the one with the fourth or the fifth in there, but all of it. And he referred to it as his formula. So when he would want George to do that kind of thing, he goes, "Okay, George, give me the formula."
Yeah, maybe we could talk about some of those parts, right? So we have the octave with that fifth or fourth in between, right? In this case, we were doing it, I guess, with the fourth, right? When we were doing that section. And then sometimes it would be with the fifth, would he do it as like a pinky bar, you think?
Yes.
That seemed to be what I was seeing. But then you were also saying that there's this other part, and this is something that people don't talk about, like the octave with the sixth or the third, or however you are thinking about it. What's going on with that? Or maybe we can get an example of that other interval that Benson would use.
He uses it a little bit on the approach on Affirmation behind the keyboard solo.
Okay.
Because you that's when you go to a B flat major, that bridge, right?
Yeah.
So he'll go, yeah. So here you have, up here on a B flat here on the 13th fret, you have the F, D, F, D. There's your sixth, and then there's your octave there. So it's like this. So it's a spread. You're skipping that one string. Right. So you get and then you can of course slide into it for expression. But I mean, so if you would run like you would with the octave with the fourth and fifth, it depends upon the scale tone you're on. You have to make sure of that, as we know. Same thing with this. It's scale wise. If you're you could start right here in the B flat position, and
So for that one,
and you got F, D, F, F, D, F.
yeah.
Yes. So if we go, then.
And so he's keeping that third on top. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then if we're going in the scale tones from there,
yeah, so the shape is basically staying the same with those three fingers, and sometimes switching to the pinky if we need to switch it to that. Like if it was like that, like C, A, C, we would switch to the pinky maybe. Yeah. Yeah, so you kind of just get used to seeing the scale. Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting.
while you're doing that, if you do that, do that again and let me play the relative minor chord behind you. So I'm playing the G minor. or even
Yeah.
an E flat major, or even an E flat major to
Yeah.
get a Lydian.
Yeah, the F with the D sounds. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's. I mean, I haven't heard really anyone talk about that aspect, and it's such a different shape too to the normal octave thing that we always see, because it's kind of going back instead of like this.
Yes, and if you think about all of this, octave related, vocabulary we're talking about, it is a full vocabulary that George has where you can switch from one to the other. So if like I'm playing on a G minor and I'm doing that relative major, but I want to go into the fourth and fifth thing too, You see?
Yeah.
So
What was it? The thing you were just doing is something that Benson does all the time. That kind of going down this. You were doing it with the fourth or the fifth in. Yeah. So you just kind of. You're not doing the back and forth on that, or you're just playing it together. I guess you could do it either way.
playing it together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's so much. There's these different like technical aspects, and then it's also all of this kind of vocab that he's developed of like the way he'll like to descend, like this kind of little idea, or ascend with the octaves. Actually, there's another clip that maybe we can discuss here where it's the ascending part of that, and we can kind of take a look at what he does here. So that little like run up, he's kind of doing it like single note lines, but it seems like it's in the shape of the octave. Let me play it again.
Sure. Yeah. Whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned earlier the fearlessness and the experimental quality and the expression and the drama all together.
Mm-hmm.
With that energy, with that like, oh, Michael Jordan,
Yeah,
I'm going to
going
score. I've been playing with him for over 40 years, and although he's, faculty-wise slowed down some,
Yeah.
I'm still amazed at his playing. Now it's more in like the beautiful chord melody stuff that he does when that blows me away, the depth of that. But that stuff was just like, I mean, that's like Hall of Fame, like insanity there.
Yeah, you don't hear anyone else even like attempting that kind of thing because you're like, that's Benson, and no one else can really touch that. But what I like about it is the fact that it's still using that kind of shape of that, but he's like using it in that single note way to lead into these other ideas. So there's such a blending of his vocabulary. He doesn't really see it as like, oh, it's the single note vocab, I'm going to switch over to this octave thing that I'm known for. It's all really just part of, Benson's vocabulary that's so vast, and using that as another element of that, like that kind of triplet octave thing.
Absolutely, yeah. Now you'll notice one thing as well. I've, of course, and being privy to everything about him, have taken on plenty of his, approach to things. But I've learned to be very, especially staying away from his territory when we're playing together.
Yeah.
If he gives me a solo, it's nothing like his playing.
Yeah.
It's going to be rock, blues, something that it's complementary to what he does, because I don't need to put a noose on and hang myself.
That's a great point. Even just musically, right? Even just musically, like Benson's gonna do Benson best. So instead of trying to do that, it makes a lot more musical sense to provide a contrast to that, and it in a way highlights what he's doing and then also highlights what you're doing as a different style to that, you know. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because yeah, many people would be, I guess, very intimidated to be the guitarist with Benson in the group. So is there anything else about that sort of balance that you could tell us about balancing your aspect?
As far as my contrast to creating contrast with George's playing.
Yeah, it could be either contrast, comping, or anything like that.
Sure. Well, it's knowing when to do what. You know, being with him for so long, I've developed kind of like a sixth sense and a premonition of knowing kind of where he's going next. So I'm very tuned into what he's doing, so I can anticipate certain things and cover one of his parts when I see that he's going somewhere else. You know, that's an aspect of it. And then, you know, also part of it is doing specifically his parts when he's singing. There might be some like tasty. Oh, there's Love Times Love. And it's to the point where sometimes he'll have me start the tune. You know, and he'll start blowing over the top of it just to get it warmed up. So there's that. Then there's all of the studio guitarist type of sounds and approaches, which spans the decade of his career, of all the studio recordings. Got to know all those parts. And then, you know, when it's time to, when he throws me a solo, it's like, you know, I've learned to, it's sink or swim. So I learned kind of early on, like, cannot be shy with this guy.
Yeah, you just got to go for it.
Yeah, it's impossible to come with too much for him, right?
Yeah, it's funny that you brought up the Love Times Love, because that one it seemed like you were just doing as the pure octaves, not as any of these other octave things we were talking about.
Very true. And also, you know, like typically when we're out on a tour or whatever and doing, you know, like a daily sound check before the show, at the end of the sound check, normally when, okay, sound check's over, everyone will disperse and go to catering because everyone wants to eat. But George will typically kind of stay down there for a little bit and like kind of play with his thumb, play his like, and that's where I like to go down there with him, and he kind of simply does this because he'll play some of the things that he learned that are his influences. Like he might, and he'll do it like this. He'll simply just said, well, Wes said, you know, whatever it is. Wes said, blah, blah, blah. Grant said, you know, so it's very fascinating to, you know, to know that he has these influences, you know, that certainly are at play behind everything.
It's really interesting hearing you talk about from that perspective because I haven't met Benson, but I've studied him a lot in like the, you know, micro detail of what he's playing and his notes and all that. And from what I've sort of gathered from that, what it seems like to me, what you were talking about with his like scientific approach, I really get the feeling in a lot of these ways that he's kind of dissected some of the best ways to play some of these ideas on guitar, like taking some of these Charlie Parker ideas that he'll talk about as an influence, or even Wes ideas, and then think about, okay, well, that's how they do it. How would I do it on this instrument? And then some of the ways I'm seeing him do it, I'm like, that's not the horn way of doing it. That's like Benson's guitar way, and it works better than I've seen other. So instead of trying to copy or like, oh, Wes does it like this, or Joe Pass does it like this, so I'm gonna just do that myself on guitar. You could really tell that he's like actively trying to discover things on the guitar in a way that's like, how am I going to do it? So it's super interesting that you're also talking about, because these are just kind of my sort of assumptions and guesses, but you kind of see that.
Yes, you're spot on there actually, because I'll give you an example. You mentioned Charlie Parker, which is probably his biggest, like, influence bebop wise. Linear approach to bebop. One bus ride we had when we were on tour, we're listening to the album Bird with Strings,
Yeah, love that.
which is Charlie Parker record. It has just Friends on it, and George sang every single solo as it came by. Now, let that sink in, right? So another time we were out in the island somewhere and had a night off. And he threw a party in his suite. It was getting late. Everyone's leaving. He says, "Hey man, stay here. Want you to hear a couple things." And he was listening to these 3 guitar CDs. It was Wes, a Grant Green, and a Tal Farlow. Played one of each of those. Sang those solos.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes. He gets it up here. It's all up in here. And he's going to find his way to do it. Now, I found for myself personally, because I've done a fair amount of transcribing over the years of many instruments, what I actually have landed on is that I don't do it perfectly, but I land in a place where I develop my own way of doing things, and it maybe I get it with, maybe there's a few notes that are not exact. So what? I mean, it's leading me to a place where I want to be.
Yeah, and I see that in Benson's playing a lot, especially on some of the more chromatic ideas, where you can really see how when he'll play a certain idea, sometimes he'll do it even when it's not, quote, like the way a piano player would do it, right? And I made this comparison in one of my previous videos to how Barry Harris might approach this based on what he's talked about versus how Benson would approach it. And one of those examples is where if we had some sort of descending line, Benson in a lot of ways will do it in a way that's what works best on guitar, but not in a way that's necessarily like fully chromatic or fully how other horn players or other, like, might not be the exact, quote, bebop scale, but it doesn't really matter because the execution of that idea and where he's going, and because it allows him to really get other more important elements like the feel the same and the phrasing the same how he wants it. He doesn't have to make those adjustments just because it's, quote, not exact. So there's all those like little details that, I mean, it really just shows you how much he's studied it. While what's amazing is, because he's such like the consummate performer, at the same time you get the feeling like he's in a way trying to, maybe not trying to, but he presents himself as such a, he's just super cool. He's not presenting himself as, I've studied this material so hard and I know all of this. It's like he does that and then he sort of lets the results speak for themselves without having to, showcase that he has done all this work.
Yes, very, very, very true. And as far as the hard work goes, one of his best friends, growing guitar player, borrowed one of George's amps one time and came back to return it to George. And George was there at the record player studying some stuff at the time when he shows up. And so he just heard him knock. He says, "Come on in." The guy came, brought the amp back in. George didn't say a word to him. He just sat there and watched him, like, intensely studying for an hour.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you can see he has that focus, like that intensity of focus that I think has been such a huge aspect of his success.
Absolutely. I will say this too. I mentioned earlier that this scientific sort of part of his thinking, where he gets fascinated with sound, whatever the source is. Many years ago, we were out on tour, and he, Yamaha makes these silent instruments.
I have one, yeah, the SLGs.
Yeah, yeah, SLGs. Well, prior to that, a predecessor was a silent violin that they had. And George, he's mentioned many times, he was fascinated with his violinist named, I think, Fritz Kreisler, something like that. He got like way into this. So he had one of these silent violins in his room. I went by his room one day, and it was, another example is his, when we do Danny Boy and he does bagpipes. Have you heard the bagpipe thing?
Yeah, for those that aren't familiar, it's using like a lot of like open strings, right, to get this kind of ringing sort of resonance, right, for the bagpipe sound.
Right, and it's uncanny. It's just uncanny. I mean, I have no idea how he just sat there and would doing it.
I had the urge to try to make the guitar sound like bagpipes.
Now, another little thing about his scientific thinking, when he was young in school, he took up mechanical drawing, and he mechanically drew out what eventually became the guitar you're holding.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
The GB series. He had this idea all the way back then.
Yeah.
Drew it. And so when he interfaced with Ibanez and they took on the project of developing the GB series, George was very, very much a part of that development.
That's really interesting, especially because I doubt there's really any other guitarist that would have both of those perspectives as the musician and artist of what he wants the instrument to do, or all the different aspects he talks about. Like I know with this, he talks about adjusting the tension here depending on the sort of response he's getting. Like on the different arenas or the different sound and all of that. So you can see, like you're saying, the kind of scientific thought process. Oh, I need to be able to do that as a musician playing in these situations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've probably heard the story about his first guitar ever, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, his stepfather who raised him with his mom, like they were poor. And he found some like beat up kind of thing. He made his first guitar, like it was a beat up kind of little thing, and he just like his stepdad was like a very handy kind of guy that way. So his first guitar was like not at all a manufactured instrument.
I think I remember parts of that from like his book, but yeah, I didn't remember the sort of detail of it. Yeah, this is super fascinating. Maybe let me bring up one other clip here. Yeah, so that little thing right there and it happened almost on the other one too, where he's holding some parts of this, but then sliding other parts. Is that what's going on? Like right on the A flat there?
You got this kind of thing, yeah, where he'll hold the pinky, anchor it down, and then do this other stuff. But I was saying how he uses all this sliding technique, also all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that horizontal thing with the sliding, whether it's ascending or descending. And as an added bonus, I think, to that technique is the fact that it sounds beautiful too, that it's not picked again.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a saxophone giving slurring, ornamentation, not everything is bam, 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 right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, incredible stuff.
I'm curious if so. The only other guitarist I've really seen that has sort of developed this very organ-like type of thing is Danny Gatton. Are you at all aware of Benson being influenced by Danny Gatton's organ type of playing?
I don't know.
Danny Gatton would do this thing that he would explicitly talk about, and I don't really hear Benson doing it in this way, but it would be basically like an organ player repeating one note here, and then basically picking with another finger the other one to imitate that organ player type of thing. And so it's just interesting because Danny Gatton's doing different kinds of organ techniques than what Benson has kind of worked on, but both trying to imitate the organ.
Right, and trying to accomplish the same thing where you have that one sustained or repeated note that's like an anchor, usually in the highest note, right?
Yeah.
And then like the other stuff that's going on underneath it. Yeah, same thing in a different way. Yeah.
He's kind of doing it flipped. That's what I thought was so interesting, is because Benson's holding the top note and doing these other ones above. The way Danny Gatton would do it would be a repeated lower note of the octave, and then would move these ones. Like that kind of thing. So it's almost like the inverse of it. They kind of came to two different like conclusions on it. Yeah, it just kind of reminded me of that. So this is some sort of descending octave lick that he kind of closes his solo out with on this. Yeah, so he kind of is getting into a lot of the things we were discussing with the waivers, with the descending stuff we were just doing, and then the drama, and yeah.
And then getting to the climax of the crazy climax as well, where he goes away from, it's not even notes anymore, right?
Yeah,
it's like
just kind of
ah.
Yeah.
I was just reminded as we were watching that, though, too. I was reminded when we watched that and listened to it of his fascination with sound, because I just came back to my mind. I have to share this. Mm-hmm. We were on tour in Australia, and that earlier that day, the promoter had sent over these Aboriginal music people to do like a private show for us in this little small room at the hotel we were at, and they had didgeridoos. You know.
Yeah.
So that night at the show, we're doing on Broadway, and we're doing the vamp out where he he stretches, and he got on the mic and went.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. He's not afraid. He's not afraid to try stuff, you know. But back to that, yeah. I mean, I think what you said, it's like that clip does give a good like overall cross section of a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. You know, descending and then like building up the intensity to come to a fevered pitch, let's say, at the end of that. And that's the kind of drama that I mentioned earlier, that it kind of, I think George is smart enough to have learned that at the end of the day, all of this is about expression, and it's important to him to be able to reach his audience. You know, that's a big deal to George.
Yeah, and it seems like he's really interested in so many aspects of the expression, right? Like the mimicking different sounds and making sure that he can like really understand like scientifically what is happening here with this sound. Can I imitate it? Can I get to that? But then the like human aspect of the expression, like can I connect that sound with the music, with the audience, which I think a lot of musicians tend to forget about, or many do, is how do I connect with the audience in this situation? And that's one of the things to me that makes Benson like all-time great is he combines all of those things at like the highest level.
Yes, ab- ab- absolutely, yeah. And it's he's also very shows a lot of gratitude to his fans in concert. Like one of the things he'll say is like, if we haven't done a particular one of the hit songs, and somebody in the audience, a heckler, might be going, breezing, breezing.
Yeah.
And George will say, brother, I want to get out of here alive. I'm going to play breezing.
That's so funny. Yeah, he knows he's got to play certain ones. Well, Michael, this has been a total blast. I'm sure we'll discuss again. I want to be respectful of your time, and you've already really given us so much here to discuss. So thank you so much for hopping on the call with me. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your stories of Benson and insight on all of these octaves and everything. Really looking forward to sharing this with people and being able to kind of give them some of this behind the scenes stories.
Cool, man. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for asking me to do this, Chase. I've been a fan of your channel for a while. I've been checking out. I like what you're doing. You're doing a really good job of it, and particularly I think on some of the ones I've seen, I like the way you break it down in a simple way, for that it's very understandable for a lot of people. I think that's important. As you know, you don't get to a place where you can kind of play the deeper George Benson stuff. Doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you checking out the channel and for saying that. Yeah, my goal with the channel, as in a lot of ways, and sometimes I'm better at this than others, is trying to find ways to basically share the things that I'm working on or kind of figuring out, or that seem to help students that I'm teaching inside my program, Chase the Guitar Academy. And so a lot of times, many of those videos come as more thought after I've seen something work with a student and trying to explain it in a way that can connect to people. Like you said, in a way that's simple and people can apply it and feel like, hey, I can actually get a little better at jazz guitar and not feel like a lot of students, I see them very frustrated, or they don't think it's possible for them to learn how to play any of this kind of thing because it's sometimes presented very like with a lot of advanced theory, a lot of complicated things, a lot of like, oh, it's going to take you 25 years. When I think there's a lot of ways we can explain concepts in a way that someone can say, okay, cool, I understand that, and I feel like I'm getting a little bit better. So that's really my goal with the channel, and sharing some of the things that I'm learning with from these different great musicians.
Yeah, well, that's a valuable way to go, because when it comes to knowledge like this, a little can go a long way. A player can come along, as we know nowadays. They're doing it younger now. Mm-hmm. They have access to like the information age we're in, and for some of these kids that come along and that have the passion, I mean, they could learn bits and pieces of this kind of a thing and apply it in their own way, and hey, they could blow up and be big.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Just good information. Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure, man. Stay in touch.
Thanks, Michael. Absolutely. I'm sure we'll talk soon, and we'll have you back for another discussion of Benson. So thanks again, Michael. See ya.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chase. Take care, man. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
See you next time.
Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for checking out the video. Let Michael know in the comments below if you enjoyed this, if you want to see Michael back, if you have any questions that we want to discuss in a future video. Drop a comment, hit like, subscribe to the channel, all those things. If you want to check out Chase Guitar Academy as well as the George Benson Master Study, you can check that out, 7-day free trial, links in the description. Thanks guys for your time, appreciate it.